So, we share. All right, so hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the opportunity to attend our webinar. This is the Black Caucus of American Library Association Recruitment and Professional Development Committee. We present public service loan forgiveness programs. Can Uncle Sam deliver? Kyra Han is our presenter here today, and we are very appreciative of the fact that she's able to talk about the public service loan forgiveness, which is a huge thing, and that impacts many of us. And just an FYI, this is definitely being recorded. The recording and some other materials will be made available along with the presentation slides. If you have access to the chat box, if you could please introduce yourself, location, and what you would like to get out of the webinar, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you haven't muted yourself, totally do so. You can also, if you want to use your webcam, you're more than welcome to do so. If you don't want to, there's no requirement for you to do so. All the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to add questions to the chat box at any time. I'll be collecting them so that Kyra can answer them. So, and then the questions can be sent to Kyra after the presentation using the email address listed there. It will be copied into the chat box. And so with that, I am going to let Kyra take over. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so happy that you guys are joining us today. Let me just bring up my slideshow and share that with you guys. All right. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you for joining us today. This presentation is a labor of love, and it is a timely topic to raise awareness for taking care of our own personal situations regarding public service loan forgiveness and our personal student loans, as well as advocating for something that your company or organization can offer as an employment benefit to staff. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to get you familiar with tools related to student loans and borrowing. Let's see, we're also going to highlight some newer research that has become available that is now talking about how student loans impact communities of color. You'll also get access to some resources to get an idea of how student loan borrowing is impacting state and local areas as well. Most importantly, you're going to figure out how to navigate and figure out your own personal student loan situation. There's been a lot of confusion around public service loan forgiveness, and you're going to learn how to apply for participating in this program. So first, I want to start off with this video.
Kyra, we can't see your screen, so if you are showing us anything, we can't see it.
Okay, was everyone able to see that video? I know there was a lot of captioning in it, so don't worry if you weren't able to hear anything. It was mostly about the captions. Um, that video was from the Morehouse graduation of 2019, where Robert F. Smith made that tremendous gift, and that is so inspiring. Please,
Kira, can you hear me? Sorry. So
yes, I
we
can hear you.
we didn't see anything. So if you're showing a presentation or you're showing a video, we are unable to see you. We just seeing your lovely face. Still,
Really?
yes.
Okay, so I was in presentation mode. Let me try and go back. Are you able to see the slide that I'm currently on?
No. So I think if you go to the bottom of the screen on Zoom and you click share screen.
Okay, let me go back into sharing and then let's see here. Let me just navigate to, well, that makes me wonder if you guys were able to see the slides. So
No,
let's
we
just,
weren't able to see anything.
okay. All right, take two. Give me 1 second. Well, are you able to see now?
Nope.
Because I did do share screen. So let's see. How about now?
Nope. Still your lovely face.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay, it's giving me end slideshow. Okay, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, technology. Let's try this again. Okay, so is everyone now able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, we will just start all over. Okay, so my name is Kyra Hahn. Obviously, you got to see my lovely face for a few minutes there. We're going to be talking about public service loan forgiveness programs today. Can Uncle Sam deliver? Um, this is a two-part webinar. Today, we're going to be focusing on part one, which is public service loan forgiveness. So, what are we going to learn today? First of all, I want to thank you guys for joining us today. This is a labor of love and it's quite a timely topic. I'm hoping to raise awareness about student loans, handling your own student loan situation. Um, this one is near and dear to my heart because we're going to start to talk about how student loans are impacting communities of color, and we're going to learn how to figure out your own personal student loan situation when it comes to federal student loans, as well as learning how to apply for public service loan forgiveness if that is an option for you. And also, we hope that you're going to be able to advocate with your employer as well. So let's see if you guys are able to see this inspirational video now. Okay, so some things that I want to highlight from that video are wow, that's such an inspiring and powerful gift because that really gets to the heart of what we're trying to do is trying to figure out how to navigate the current student loan system and make progress towards paying down or paying off our student loans. Um, and it's so inspiring to see the Morehouse class of 2019 graduate without the burden of debt. Um, it, so I'm really inspired to see what's going to end up happening with them and what opportunities they'll be able to access without having student loans. Um, please don't try to look them up or track them down. um, But on that note, we're going to talk about the current student loan debt situation and get into what has happened over time because it's really an evolving situation. Um, over over the period of probably the late 1990s to present, you've really seen a rise in education costs, an evolution of student lending. I know you guys have probably heard all the reports that student loan debt continues to rise. Student loan debts are now reported over 1.7 trillion. And some things that don't get talked about very often is that that's not just impacting the student. Um, in the current situation that we're in, that involves a parent borrower, that involves the student, and that also involves a potential co-signer depending upon when the loans were taken out. So basically, you're talking about impacting either multi-generations or a minimum of 3 people for every student loan that's issued. Obviously, what we do know for sure is that the current model of student lending for student loans is not working well. And even though people are repaying on their loans, they're not seeing the balances go down and they are continuing to rise due to interest and other factors. So, the impact on communities of color, there has been research that is starting to come out. And in this slide here, you can see it's from Consumer Finance Bureau. Um, this is just for undergraduates with student loan debt between the ages of 18 to 24. So this slide is very powerful because as you can see, African Americans, 90% of us take out student loans in order to be able to go to college. Latinos are second at 72%, and with whites at 66%, and Asian Americans are the lowest impacted category at 51%. But clearly, students of color take out loans at higher rates, and often that is due to pay quality, lower wages, and fewer access to resources. All of those are contributing factors. Another thing is that borrowers of color experience delinquency and default on student loans at higher rates than than whites do. And there's not a clear reason or understanding for why that is. Again, I believe it may be tied to access and resources. What's really surprising, there was a recent study offered by the American Association of University Women that came out last year. And to me, this chart really speaks to the impact of gender gaps and pay inequality. Um, of the amount of student loan that is held, women actually hold 2/3 of the total balance. We hold approximately $890 billion. And I'm not a mathematician, but I did a quick calculation based on the 1.7 trillion. And that means that women hold 52% of total student loan debt. Part of the reason why that is a challenge is because women historically earn lower rates. It also takes them longer to pay off debt. And then when you add race into the mix, Black women are the most significantly impacted by this debt. Um, we hold the highest education balances, and yet we earn the lowest incomes. So we don't have benefactors. So I want to give us the tools for how to navigate public service loan forgiveness, because this is a viable option for anyone who works in a public service field. Um, so there are two types of student loan forgiveness programs. Today we're focusing on the first one, which is public service loan forgiveness. And that's going to focus on the time period from 2007 to present. And the reason why that is because that's when the program was created. Next week for our webinar, we're going to focus on temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness and how that program got created. So right now, the top questions for loan forgiveness programs involve these three major questions. These also happen to be the top challenges. So the first one is, do you have the right loan type? The second question is repayment plans. Which repayment plans qualify for public service loan forgiveness participation? And then the third question is qualifying payment counts. So are your payments counting towards the 120 payment count requirement? So basically, this program, Public Service Loan Forgiveness, is a real program. A lot of people think that this is fake, and it's not. I'm here to tell you it was created by US Congress and legislation. Specifically, it was the College Cost Reduction and Access Act in 2007. So basically what this did was it created a program that said if you work in public service for 10 years, from 2007 to present, and if you have certain type of federal student loans, which happens to be you have to have direct loans, and you make 10 years worth of payments, which is 120 or more payments on a qualifying repayment plan, and you work full time, for the sake of this program, full time is considered 30 or more hours a week, then you would be eligible to have your loans, your existing loan balance forgiven at the end of that period. Another thing that I want to mention is you do have to be currently working in public service at the time of forgiveness. Right now, this program is currently what I describe as an all or nothing program. You have to meet all the requirements or you get no forgiveness. There are some legislators that are working to try and challenge that, though. So let's talk about who can participate in this program. So, because there's a lot of questions about this as well. Anyone who is employed by the government, so local, state, federal, or tribal agencies. Anyone who works for a nonprofit organization that has a 501c3 designation. And lastly, what I'm calling private public service organizations, and that includes military, public health, safety, emergency, library, education, disability, and elder services. The reason why I frame it that way is because if The organization's primary purpose is as a public, offering a public service. They may have established a specialized tax district, for example, that may not be a 501c3 status, yet they may still qualify to participate in this program. Um, your HR department for where you work will be able to verify, most likely, if they are a qualifying organization. Some special circumstances that I want to highlight, and this is particularly relevant to librarians. If you work part-time for more than one public service employer, which is common with a lot of my library friends, um, please know that you can still participate as long as your cumulative hours and your weekly average exceed 30 or more. What you will need to do is you will need to submit paperwork for each employer that you work for. Um, Another special circumstance on participation is parents who have plus loans. If the parent works in public service, then there is a more complex process that they can try to participate in, and a certain type of repayment plan to try to get forgiveness of the plus loans. If you would like more information on that, please feel free to email me after this presentation and I will send you more information about that. Um, the third special circumstance is Peace Corps and AmeriCorps service participation. Um, those involve lump sum payments towards public service loan forgiveness. And so that's why I describe that as a special circumstance. So there's two federal student loan service programs. One, which is probably more commonly known, is called FFEL, which stands for Federal Family Education Loan Program. This loan program existed from 1965 to 2009. And under that loan program, private banks were involved and acted as guarantors to loans that were offered by the federal government, and a majority of schools participated in this loan program type. Unfortunately, if you have FFEL loans, those loans do not qualify for participation in PSLF. Um, and that has caused a lot of anger with a lot of participants who are looking to try to qualify for PSLF. Um, the way the legislation was written when it was created, it specified that they had to be direct loans. Direct loans is the newer educational loan program offered by Department of Ed. Um, it initially began as a pilot program back in 1992, and as it got tested and tested, it eventually, this is the program that allowed the government to become a direct lender to students. However, that did not happen until 2010. 2010 was when direct loans were widely available. So anyone who has taken out loans from 2010 and later, you probably have a direct loan, and so it will be a lot easier for you to participate. Prior to 2010, schools had the choice of whether to opt in to participate in direct loans, and many did not choose to do that. If you have a mix of both loans, you may have to investigate a consolidation option. So, how do you figure out your own student loan situation and figure out what kind of student loans you have? Well, You can do that now on Federal Student Aid's website. I've included a screenshot of their login page here. You will need a login in order to view your student loan information. If you don't have one, you can see from the screenshot here that you can create an ID for their website. If you've already completed a FAFSA, for instance, you probably already have a logon. But basically, on Federal Student Aid's website, you will be able to find out basic information like what types of loans you have, what interest rate you have, um, what repayment plan you are on, um, and you may have to click around because as recently as last week, Federal Student Aid has been making a lot of changes to their website. And I think that there's going to be more changes going forward to the process in the website as they try to roll out more user-friendly options. One change that I do want to highlight is that on their website, they had a tool previously called Repayment Estimator. They've now changed the name of that tool to Loan Simulator, but it is essentially the same thing. It allows you to go through and model different repayment plans and get a guesstimate for what your payments may be, whether you based on your current student loan portfolio. I'm not sure if they have changed the functionality if you don't have student loans. Previous to this update, there was an option for you to be able to use the repayment estimator without um, incorporating your own student loans so that you could get a chance to model what it would be like if you took out student loans. So you may have to tinker with that as well. Some additional things that you can find here in their website as well are the public service loan forgiveness help tool, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And also, if you need to apply for an income driven repayment plan, you can now apply online for that at Federal Student Aid's website. So let's dig into income-driven repayment plans. Um, as you can see, I've included a nice chart here from the Institute for College Access and Success. I really like this chart because it has this column called available, and it tells you when these different repayment plans became available. It also tells you how long of a payment term you're looking at and what the percentage of your monthly payment and discretionary incomes are. Um, as you can see under the eligibility column, some of these will have partial financial hardship requirements and others will not. So basically, income-driven repayment plans are not exclusive to public service loan forgiveness. You don't have to be participating in public service loan forgiveness in order to take advantage of these. However, if you want to participate in public service loan forgiveness, it is a requirement that you be on one of these income-driven repayment plans. If you are on a repayment plan that is not listed in this chart, you likely are not on a qualifying repayment plan for public service loan forgiveness. Um, and so you may want to consider changing your repayment plan. Basically, most of these will limit the amount of your discretionary household income to 10 to 15%, um, which is supposed to be designed to make your payment affordable. Um, you do have to recertify annually and you have to submit household income each year that you participate in an income-driven repayment plan. I have included links here to a paper form. However, you can also apply online on Federal Student Aid's website, like I described earlier. Also, when you participate in these income-driven repayment plans, they will ask for income documentation. The easiest income documentation that can be provided is usually a recent tax return. So I have included a link here to the Internal Revenue Service website. They have an option to get a transcript of recent tax returns for the past 7 years. And I do want to highlight one thing really quick before I advance to the next slide that is based on household income. So your spouse or domestic partner have to sign off on the form every year. And that's even if they don't work in public service. So next, we're going to talk about employment certification form. For this one here, again, I've included a link to the paper form. And for this one, you can only do a paper form on this. The organization that you work for matters. It does not matter what your position is in the organization. So you could be a person who simply shelves books for 30 hours a week and participate, or you could be a library director and still participate in this program. So it doesn't matter what your position or title are in the organization. You have to submit this form in order to have your payments count. Basically, what this form does is your Human Resources Department will sign off and list your start date, your end date, and sign the form, and you'll send it in. I recommend having this form submitted annually. If you do not submit this form, Department of Ed does not do automatic payment counts at all. And I know earlier they were not advising annual submission of this form. I think over time, the Department of Ed and Federal Student Aid have changed their advice on this, because a lot of people, when forgiveness became available, which was as early as 2017 and 2018, they were submitting this form, and then they found out that they had made all these payments and that they weren't counting. So the only way to know if your payments that you are making are counting towards public service loan forgiveness are to fill out and submit this form. It allows you to catch errors early. So if you are initially enrolling in public service loan forgiveness, this is the strategy that I recommend. I recommend first of all, I recommend paper. Submit all paper forms for the first time. And start off by writing a cover letter saying what you want to do. So literally, I encourage people to write this cover letter as if it's going to a person who has never ever heard of public service loan forgiveness before. So literally, you're going to say, I would like to enroll in public service loan forgiveness. And then you're going to include copies of all these forms that I've included the links to. So you're going to include your income-driven repayment plan request form. And I've included a link to that. It's in the middle underneath having to have it signed by your spouse or domestic partner, which we just discussed a few minutes ago. I also included a link to um, the IRS get transcript tool so that you can provide a copy of your most recent tax return, because that's what they most often use as the tool for calculating your new payment. Um, you'll want to include your signed employment certification form, and I've included a link to that form as well, signed by your HR representative for your current employer. And then I encourage people to make copies of the forms. I encourage 2 copies, and here's why. Oh, let me go back one slide. Sorry about that. I'm getting excited here with my hand gesturing. You're going to want to send a copy of the forms to your current loan servicing company. And then you're going to take the second copy and you're going to send it to Fed Loan Servicing. I've included their post office box address there. And usually I encourage people to make a copy of the form for themselves too, so that you are having a digital copy of any paperwork that you're submitting in case you have to reproduce it for any reason. You're probably wondering why I'm having you send paperwork off to some random um, company that you're not dealing with. And the reason why is this: it's because Fed Loans is the exclusive loan servicing company for public service loan forgiveness programs. So it's only a matter of time. Once you express interest in participating in public service loan forgiveness, it is a matter of time before your loan sh- servicer should transition from whomever is currently doing it to Fed Loans. Um, they are the only company that does the evaluation to determine qualifying payment counts as well. Um, Unfortunately, the challenge is that there have been reported problems that some loan servicing companies are not switching the accounts over to Fed Loans, even though participants have requested to participate in public service loan forgiveness. Um, the company report that I get most often is Navient. Um, and so I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. Also, I get a lot of questions related to what's the estimated timeline. Unfortunately, I don't have a timeline for how long it takes for the transition from one loan servicing company to another. It does vary quite a bit, and there's not been a lot of disclosure about what that process looks like. So once you do the initial enrollment, you have to recertify every year for 10 years. So for the proof of income, 2 things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to recertify your income for your income-driven repayment plan participation. And again, I've provided the link to the IRS Get Transcript tool. You can also use pay stubs with your gross pay listed as well. If you needed to get copies of tax records beyond the most recent, I do know that the IRS Get Transcript tool offers up to 7 years of past tax and income data. And again, the income-driven repayment plans are based on household income. So they're going to look at that, and then they're going to calculate what your new payment is. Depending upon what your uh, household income situation is, it is very realistic in some cases that your payment may be listed as zero. If your payment is listed as $0, guess what? Don't worry about it. And even though your payment is listed at $0, they should still be counting towards the qualifying payment count. Another thing that I do want to highlight here is, contrary to conventional personal finance advice, when it comes to student loans and participating in income-driven repayment plans, do not pay any extra on your student loans. Do not pay more than what they have designated your payment amount to be. If you do that, it will cause complications for your public service loan forgiveness participation. I've gotten several reports from the group that I moderate that it puts you into a weird pay ahead status and then it throws off your qualifying payment counts. So that is something that a lot of people were not made aware of. And for me as a Fed loan customer myself, I know they're doing a new marketing campaign talking about paying ahead on your student loans. Please do not do that. It will wreak havoc on your payment count. The other thing that I want to talk about is the employment certification forms. You're going to do those every year as well. I will say that as of 2018, that there was a tool introduced called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Help Tool. It's available on Federal Student Aid's website. It's supposed to be an online tool to help with completing the employment certification form. Really, I've tested it out and it does not work for new borrowers. It only creates a printable form based on previous ECF form submissions. So I still encourage paper submission, or if Fed Loans happens to be your servicer, they do have a new upload tool that you can use to submit your form that way. So let's say you've gone through all 10 years of recertifications and you're still working in your qualifying job for in public service and you're ready to apply for forgiveness. So I've included the link here for the final application for forgiveness form. This form has to be signed off by both you and your employer. So that's very similar to the way the employment certification form works. One thing I want to highlight is you do have to currently be working in public service at the time in which forgiveness is granted. So please don't think that, oh my goodness, I've worked 10 years, I can give notice now, submit this application, and be done. No, you have to continue to be working at the time in which you submit the application and at the time in which they forgive your debt. Okay? What can happen? You could be approved. Yay! Oh my goodness, I'm going to be happy for you if you're approved. Please go celebrate. But I will say the denial is an option as well. If you get denied, try to figure out the reason for the denial. It could be as minor as forgetting to sign some paperwork, make necessary corrections, and reapply. The other thing that I do want to highlight that is that under this program, any forgiveness that you receive is not considered taxable income. So you won't have to worry about a huge tax bill on the amount that is forgiven. So why are the denial rates so high and the approval rates so low? So based on my research and observations, this is the timeline that I came up with for tools. Basically, Department of Ed did not roll out the necessary tools for this program in a timely manner. And I've highlighted some of those things earlier within our presentation. So remember when we were talking about income-based repayment plans and their availability? From 2009 to 2015, and that's part of the reason why I use that chart so that you can see it, the program started in 2007. The earliest income-based repayment plan was not available until 2 years later, 2009. Um, Loan type, we touched on that. Direct loans were not widely available to borrowers until 2010. So, borrowers 2010 and later, they are going to have a much easier time than borrowers who borrowed before 2010 because they may not have the right loan type. The employment certification form, that did not become available until 2012. That was the earliest that that form became available. And then lastly, the application for final forgiveness. That form did not become available until 2017 because no one would qualify for forgiveness earlier than October of 2017. So, what are these forgiveness rates looking like? The latest, I have listed the latest loan forgiveness statistics for both public service loan forgiveness and temporary expanded loan forgiveness. And these are as of September of 2019, which is the latest data set that is available from federal student aid. So to date, there have been 1,561 approvals, which is a small number in comparison to the number of applications. For temporary expanded PSLF, the approvals are 1,035 in comparison to 20,000 applications. But the requirements for TEPSLF are a lot more stringent, and we'll talk about that more in next week's webinar. So, why is human resources your ally? Many people in HR may not be aware of the public service loan forgiveness program. I know for me that was the case in 2016, which is about when I started my advocacy work. I started it between 2016 and 2017. So I started with a conversation with my employer. A great way to start the discussion with your employer is with a file link that I've included here from Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. They actually came up with a guide for employers to help employees with student loan repayment. They also have an employer pledge that they created as a way to encourage public service employers to distribute information, to share information about this program. You know, if your HR department isn't aware of it, they are missing out on an opportunity to recruit staff, to retain staff. And the nice thing is that this program really requires a small amount of HR staff time. All it really requires is them to sign off on forms. So in starting the conversation, if you are an introvert, you could simply print off this guide or email it to them and say, would you consider offering this as part of your benefits package? And that's exactly what I did. So I will show you in the next link, the next slide. Here's an example of what I ended up doing. I talked with my HR department. They were on board, and so they created this slide that was displayed in our break rooms during 2018 to help staff become aware, hey, you may qualify for this federal program for your student loans. It's as simple as that. It could be as simple as having links to federal student aid's web pages about these programs on your benefits portal. But that's a great way to share information and help raise awareness and participation in the program. Some consumer finance things to be aware of. As I touched on earlier, student loans have a multi-generational impact. Even though the lovely video clip we saw from Robert F. Smith highlighted millennials, um, I can tell you for certain that this is a rising problem with Gen Xers, because oftentimes what you have is parents are still repaying on their own student loans, and now they're sending their kids off to school, which is increasing the loan debt burden. Also, seniors who may have been career changers may still be repaying on their student loans as well. Um, Another huge problem is a lack of disclosure about the situation that you're getting into. When you're taking out student loans today, you're talking about a minimum repayment term of anywhere from as few as 10 years, which is what a standard repayment plan is considered, all the way up to 30 years if you're on an extended repayment plan. So that's a long time. And that's something that should be factored in when you're making your decision making as to whether or not you want to take out loans for school. Student loans must meet special conditions for bankruptcy. Um, they do. Unfortunately, they have to meet an undue hardship requirement. And some attorneys would say that student loans were ineligible for bankruptcy protections. They are recently, as of this year, starting to change that advice, and so it may depend upon a judge. But if it meets undue hardship and a special requirement called the Bruner test, then the decision is really up to the particular judge. But I know that this is something that our candidates that are running for office for president are discussing if you're following those debates. Another thing that a lot of people are not aware of is that there is no statute of limitations for collections of student loan debt. I don't know of another debt product that is like this. So basically, if you don't pay on your loans, they can seize your tax returns. They may prevent access to Social Security benefits and other things. And lastly, there are definitely obstacles for trying to resolve customer service issues related to student loan accounts. There doesn't seem to be a clear way to do it, hence a lot of reason for a lot of lawsuits. And basically, we are waiting on uh, the outcome of several lawsuits um, to figure out how to settle some of these problems with accounting and other things as it relates to student loans. So basically, I've touched on some of these things, but just to clarify, default is when you don't make payments on your student loans for anywhere between 180 to 270 days. Delinquent um, is a later status. For 1 to 90 days. So that's not as serious as default. Um, Rehabilitation is a one-time opportunity that allows you to get your student loans out of default status. And of course, the last few bullet points um, cover what I touched on earlier about bankruptcy. And basically, NPR recently reported that it is a possible option. It does depend upon the judge. Personally, um, this is a personal quote that I came up with because I think this most accurately describes our current situation of student lending. To me, it is a universal form of economic disenfranchisement. Um, and the reason why I say that is because you have to complete a FAFSA in order to be considered for scholarships or any sort of grants, loans, etc. And then once you sign on for that, there is not an easy way to negotiate getting out of that debt if you encounter some sort of hardship or get into financial trouble. And I don't think student loans should be a situation where you pay them until you die. And I know that that sounds dire, and that's why I'm such an advocate for change on this. We're at a unique time where we're able to start discussing these things. And so that's part of the reason why I think it's so important for us to change or advocate for changing the current student lending process. So I do want to share some resources with you for trying to figure out what student loan uh, may look like in your state and also on a local level. So I've included a resource here from TICAS, which is the Institute for College Access and Success. Um, in this screenshot here, I featured Oklahoma. That happens to be where the upcoming BCALA conference will be in August. And so it is an interactive map if you visit the link, and you can mouse over each state and it will show you an average debt load per student and in comparison with the state population. Um, this next slide here, this one is an interactive slide. It is from an organization called mappingstudentdebt.org. I chose Atlanta for this one because there are a lot of historically Black colleges in that area. I gave you the interactive version, but when you visit their website, there is a tool that allows you to go to zip code level. And basically what this project did was it took Experian credit reporting data as a tool to try and measure student loan debt in areas. And it's really fascinating because you can get down to where you locally are to see how student loan is impacting your community. Lastly, I do want to reassure you that you can do the paperwork for public service loan forgiveness yourself. If anyone asks you for money related to student loan forgiveness, it is a scam. Walk away. Literally, we're talking about maybe an hour's worth of time to print out the paperwork, visit your HR representative, have it signed, submit it, whether you do that by mail or email. So it's definitely something that you can do yourself. Student loan forgiveness rates are likely to rise in 2020 and beyond. So I do want to let you know that there is hope going forward, and that is because as of 2020, you have all of the tools in place for loan forgiveness as of 2010 with the loan type. And so I think we will start to see those forgiveness numbers grow. On the flip side, if you're already participating in public service loan forgiveness and you are worried about the program potentially going away, I can reassure you that it's highly unlikely that the program would go away. They would have to grandfather existing participants in the program in, and any changes that are proposed would impact future borrowers. And lastly, I can say that you can reliably anticipate more change in the future when it comes to these programs. I know that there is talk of possibly combining or creating a form as it relates to applying for temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. And there are many legislative bills that are talking about expanding the program's coverage as well, to make it to make the forgiveness occur over a shorter period of time or achieve partial forgiveness after 5 years versus 10, etc., in order to help more people with their student loan debt. Um, so you've heard me reference it earlier in this presentation. So temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness, which is what we're going to talk about next week, is a program that was created in the 2018 tax bill. It created a $700 million one-time fund available on a first-come, first-served basis for student loan forgiveness reconsideration. These funds are available until they run out, and as of September 2019, of the 700 million, there's still 656 million remaining. So there is a strong possibility for getting forgiveness under that program as well, even if you were on the wrong repayment plan. All right, shall we open it up for questions and answers?
Hi. Okay, so apparently my video decided that it's not going to work anymore. So yes, Kyra, if you could please exit out of sharing your screen so I could just temporarily share mine, I would greatly appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We do acknowledge that we are over time and we apologize for the tech issues that we had in the beginning. Let me just very briefly share my slides so we can wrap this up, and then you all will have the opportunity to ask your questions. Okay, so let me see, share from current slide. Okay, so thank you so much for taking the time to attend. So this officially concludes the webinar. There are, I think, 1 or 2 questions that were in the chat box. And this is the upcoming webinar, and just letting you know about the Recruitment and Professional Development Committee. We have the Professional Development Digest. If you want more information, you can email us. And with that, I am going to let the folks start asking you some questions. So the first one, I don't think anyone had a specific question, but I know Chandra, I'm going to mispronounce people's name, forgive me. She was kind of looking at like how, like if you do apply for it and giving you payments that you can afford, what are some tips that is there any tips that you can share regarding that? Like, so if you apply and you're like, okay, this amount is, it's not feasible, it's not realistic. Like, what are some tips that you can, take so she can go back to them with?
My first question would be if you are a married borrower, because this does tend to impact married borrowers adversely. This is an unofficial technique that I recommend. But if you are a married borrower, I suggest stating in a letter each time you recertify, stating that you are the only person in your household that works in public service. That is helpful. However, if you are not married, then my question would be what repayment plans are they offering you? Because hopefully they should be limited to 10 to 15% of what is considered discretionary income. So that I'm not sure. I mean, you definitely can respond back and ask them for how they're coming up with their numbers. But it may take several tries. But I do know that they do factor in any alimony or payments that you're receiving for child care into that calculation as well. Um, but yeah, you may have to push back on it, unfortunately, um, and see what else they're able to come up with for you. That's the first time I've actually heard that, because most of the time, um, you know, they give you a chart, and even on the uh, loan estimator, um, it should give you ballparks. So maybe try running that and doing a screenshot of those figures. And if the figures that they're coming back at you with are different, asking them why they're not honoring the figures that are coming from federal student aids uh, estimator. That may be a good technique to start with. I know I've had to do that personally, and that has worked, and they've adjusted accordingly. Um, but yeah, I would definitely ask some additional questions as to how they're coming up with the number for your payment. And it will vary every year because you have to resubmit your income every year.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? You can feel free to type it in the chat box, and bear in mind that we are staying on for a few more minutes, so if you still have some time to chime in with any questions, feel free to do so. If there's not any burning or pressing questions, you all do know that you can submit questions using this email. Um, if there's anything that you listened to today that you had a little bit more questions about. So it sounds like we do not have any more questions, comments, concerns. So we just want to thank you so much. As you said, that it's been a labor of love getting to this point, and we greatly appreciate everyone who's taken their time to join us here today. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Um, well, I want to thank everyone for choosing to spend part of their telecommuting day with us. Stay safe and stay well with COVID-19. Um, and please feel free to reach out and email any additional questions you may have. Also, I encourage you to join my Facebook group as well, where I regularly post articles and updates related to student loan forgiveness.
Great. So thank you.
Oh, and don't forget to join us next week for temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness.
Yes, yes, definitely that. So yes, stay safe, stay well. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. All right, goodbye all.